Uh, to me, Jean Féron was a revelation. I'm originally from Zenon Park, and actually, our family farm is actually maybe 10 miles away from the area where he had his little cabin in the woods and wrote for 20, 30 years. He wrote like 34 novels. I had to discover them when I was studying in Quebec City. But what fascinates me even more and was kind of the basis of my passion and all of the research I did for 4 years regarding his novel La Métisse was French identity in the West. It's not something that I learned when I was in school. So to have someone who wrote about the prairies, wrote about the Métis reality, wrote about the French immigration in the West, these are all themes that really spoke to me, where no one had ever been able to define exactly who I was. I always knew that I wasn't Quebecois, but I wasn't Anglo-Saskatchewan. So the whole definition of the identity of the Francescois people, to me, in my own personal experience, started in a certain way with the discovery of Jean Féron and his writings.
I was working in Regina at Radio-Canada, and one of my colleagues, I was a producer, and one of my colleagues did a story about this French writer from Zenon Park. And the story was that he donated a tickle trunk, like, those shoes tickle trunks. It was full of all his writings, of all his manuscripts of his books in French, and they donated it to the archives of Saskatchewan. And I said, well, who is this guy? So the more I dug into his story, his personal story, his professional story of all his writings, he had me hooked. He had me hooked on his whole life story. Yeah. And as being a documentist, doing research and loving to tell stories about people, I just had to find out more about him.
What's fascinating is that he wrote like 34 novels, many of which were really based in Quebec history and very patriotic. I used to call it kind of the French patriotic Harlequin romances. But then came a day when he published Les Métis, and the historical background is all, Lou Riel, the Métis, the main character, Irelzine, La Métis. She was a French teacher in a small French school. She refused to stop teaching French when the government made the French schools illegal. Mm-hmm. So talk about hitting, the hammer on the nail of one of the turning points in French history in Western Canada. And then Maxon, who is the antagonist, who is an Irishman from Ontario who came to the prairies to, as they say in the book, put bullets under the skin of the Métis. So put these two characters together, and we speak of racism, we speak of immigration, whether it be French or English. We talk about agriculture, we talk about solidarity amongst Francophones. So many themes that are very today typical, but at that point in time were inexistent or fairly inexistent. So today we can look back and just be not be happy, but inspired by what he saw more than 100 years ago as the burgeoning growth and development of French identity in Western Canada. So if we didn't have people like him, Georges Bugnet and a few others in Western Canada, we wouldn't know what the underlying themes of social reality were at that time in history. So to me, I feel we're so fortunate to have this. And the only thing that makes me wonder is why today we're not celebrating this individual more than we have in the past. Style of writing maybe hasn't aged as well as other classical writers, but the content and all of the marques, the kind of the themes and the key settings in its novels can all be applied to our reality today. So I hope that all the kids in the schools someday will be able to see that this is how things were, this is what has changed, this is what has stayed the same, this is what makes us unique as French in Saskatchewan or in Western Canada. So to me, to think that this person lived half his life in my hometown, in this small cabin in the woods, not even 10 miles away from my family farm, and that I grew up with some of his grandkids, it's amazing, amazing.
The first things that I found out when I was doing my research was he was one of the very first French Canadian writers that published outside of Quebec. So, I mean, I think that's something to celebrate. My God, he's, you know, there was a lot of French people that moved outside of Quebec in the early 1900s, but he was the very first one that was actually able to get in the maison d'édition, like publishing to publish his books. Another thing that I was really interested about that people should know, when he sold his books to la maison d'édition Edouard Garand in Quebec, he was competing with a lot of other Quebec writers. The Quebec people wanted to buy his books because the Quebecers were interested in finding out about life outside of Quebec, like, you know, how all about the Métis, like Michel mentioned, about the natives here in Western Canada, about all the French settlements in Western Canada, and agriculture. All of these things are so important in the making of our Western provinces, of the prairies. And of course, he was the one voice in the Western world for Quebec readers. So I think that's something that has to be really developed and published about all of this man's work.